What's up, Internet? This is the too long didn't read for my new book, Uncertainty, the Computer Science of Everything. This story is called Quantum Computing Fast and Slow. And in this story, we discuss System 1 and System 2 from behavioral economics. We show how these two systems compete against each other as generative adversarial networks, which enables us to create a mathematical formula for the human soul. One of the earliest models for how humans operate comes from ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks believed that inside each person was actually two animals, a horse and its rider. The horse corresponds to the body, and the rider corresponds to our soul. And over the past 50 years, psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman performed science experiments on people to learn more about these two systems of thinking. They essentially invented the science known today as behavioral economics. Kahneman eventually won a Nobel Prize for their work and published the research in his book, Thinking, Fast and Slow. It's best to hear Kahneman's descriptions for what he calls System 1 and System 2, so see if you can guess which one is the horse and which one is the rider. System 1 operates automatically and quickly with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. System 2 allocates attention to the effortful mental activities that demand it, including complex computations. The operations of System 2 are often associated with the subjective experience of agency, choice, and concentration. Now you can pause as I scroll through more of his description of System 1 and System 2. System 2, our consciousness, is like the captain of a large cruise ship. If everything is working well on schedule with no surprises, then there's not much to do. System 2 is free to be creative and innovative and conserve its attention, but if something unexpected happens below deck, the captain is the only person who can save the day. The more our System 2 can train our System 1 to handle situations without panic, the less often our System 2 needs to be called into action. And I show this with an example in sports, and suggest this really good book called The Talent Code. Tversky and Kahneman spent most of their careers probing the limits of System 1 and System 2. They devised experiments that reveal how these agents work, but more importantly, they demonstrated when, where, how, and why they fail. Tversky and Kahneman called the quirks of these systems cognitive biases. And here's a list of the cognitive biases described in Kahneman's book. You can pause as I'm reading if you want to read the description. Attribute substitution, the availability heuristic, anchoring, loss aversion, framing, theory-induced blindness, hindsight bias, correspondence bias, implicit bias, confirmation bias, affinity bias, self-serving bias, belief bias, embodied cognition, status quo bias, overconfidence effect, and physical attractiveness stereotype. So as you can see, when our System 2 relies on our System 1 too much, it leads to errors in our judgment. And the opposite is also true. When our System 2 relies on our System 1 too little, it can also lead to errors in judgment. Now that we understand System 1 and System 2, it will be much easier for us to see how humans are very sophisticated, generative artificial intelligence. Remember, artificial doesn't mean fake or digital or plastic. It simply means designed. Now here is Wikipedia to explain the Generative Adversarial Network. A GAN is a class of machine learning frameworks where two neural networks contest each other in a form of a zero-sum game, where one agent's gain is another agent's loss. GANs work by training two neural networks, a generator and a discriminator, in a competitive process. The generator takes random noise as input and generates outputs, while the discriminator network takes inputs from both the generator network and real data and tries to distinguish between the two. During training, the generator network learns to create outputs that are similar to the real data, while the discriminator network learns to better distinguish between the generated and real data. This process continues until the generator network can produce outputs that are realistic enough to fool the discriminator network. Our conscious and subconscious minds are pitted against each other like this too. In the second chapter, we learned how quantum mechanics only renders reality around each observer like a first-person video game. In the third chapter, we learned how our subconscious minds generate our first-person experience by making quantum calculations with the universe billions of times per second. Our conscious discriminator minds are much slower, operating on clock cycles between 2 and 50 times per second. It may be difficult to believe, but our minds are generative adversarial networks. The rest of this chapter will explore our generator and discriminator networks with more than 50 books from psychology. We will see how the first-person experience from our generator networks includes all kinds of lies and hallucinations for our discriminator networks to uncover. From the moment of our birth, our System 1 has been performing little science experiments like knocking over wooden blocks just to see what happens next. Our System 1 mastered Newtonian physics a decade before our System 2 learned the equation F equals ma. Our lying self gets a 5-year head start on our remembering self. So here's how Daniel Kahneman describes the division between our two neural networks. He wrote, "Odd as it may seem, I am my remembering self, and the experienced self who does my living is like a stranger to me." At Christians, our generative adversarial network architecture has some really important implications for the Bible. For example, the word soul is not in the original Greek Bible. The word that Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Paul wrote was the Greek word psyche. So psychology is literally soulology. The word soul may not mean exactly what you think it means. In the North American Standard Bible, psyche is only translated as soul 47% of the time. The NASB also translate the exact same word as heart, heartily, life, mind, person, soul, suspense, and thing. This book is my theory of everything, and every theory is only as good as its best equation, right? So here's my best equation. I am asserting the following equivalences for all philosophers, scientists, and Christians. System 1 is our subconscious mind, is equal to the horse, is a quantum GAN generator, equals body, equals flesh in the Bible terminology. Our System 2 is our consciousness, the Greek writer, also known as a quantum GAN discriminator, equals our psyche, equals our soul. These equations are unprovable for all the Bayesian reasons. There is nothing but uncertainty all the way down to the pixels of reality. So maybe a better name for this theory would be the theory of every uncertainty, because everything is a subset of uncertainty. Up next, we explore the mystery below the surface. In that story, we isolate the features of our subliminal System 1 neural network using research on young children. We also learn just how little we should trust our own subconscious minds.